6 months with no nanny, until the Apache woman told the rancher, "I'm here now." Tom Harris sat on the edge of the porch, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rough cloth. The Arizona sun beat down relentlessly, painting the wide-open desert in shades of gold and brown. Dust swirled across the land, and the distant hills shimmered in the heat. He looked at the small cluster of buildings that made up his ranch, the main house, a barn, and the corrals where his horses grazed, and felt a heavy weight in his chest. 6 months had passed since his wife had died, and those months had been some of the hardest of his life. Raising 3 children alone on a ranch was nothing like he had imagined. Every day was a blur of chores, work, and endless responsibilities. There was always something to fix, feed, or manage. The children, Emma, 7, Lucas, 5, and little Sophie, just 2, needed constant attention. And unlike city life, there was no school bus to rely on, no neighbor to drop in and help. Tom was alone with them, and the loneliness had begun to press on him, like the desert sun on his back. The morning had started early, as it always did. Tom had risen before sunrise to check the fences around the corral, making sure the horses had enough food and water. Then came breakfast, a chaotic affair of spilled cereal and squabbles over milk. Emma was already arguing with Lucas over who got to sit in the front seat of the old pickup truck, while Sophie squealed from her high chair, demanding someone pick her up. Tom had sighed, rubbing his temples, and tried to remember the words of advice his father had once given him. "One day at a time, son. Take care of what you can, and the rest will come." But the advice didn't make it any easier. He had tried hiring help, posting signs in the town nearby, asking anyone who had experience with children or ranch work to come by. Some came, but most stayed only a day or two. The work was too hard, the hours too long, and the ranch too far from town. A few had even said the children were too wild, too noisy, too much to handle. And so, Tom had given up, believing he would have to manage alone. It wasn't that he hadn't tried to find moments of joy. He loved the children fiercely, and he tried his best to make life fun for them. Sometimes, when the work allowed, he took them on short rides through the fields on his old horse, Rusty. Emma loved to pretend she was a cowgirl, swinging her arms as she called out commands to the horses. Lucas preferred running alongside Rusty, laughing every time the horse neighed or galloped faster. Sophie mostly giggled at the sound of her siblings, her tiny hands reaching out to touch everything she could reach. Yet, the days were long, and the nights longer. After the children were finally in bed, Tom would sit on the porch, staring at the horizon, wondering how he could keep this life going without falling apart. There were moments when he felt he was failing them, moments when he wanted to collapse and let someone else take over. But no one came, and he was all they had. The ranch work never seemed to end. The fences always needed repair after storms or wandering livestock. The irrigation system for the crops sometimes broke, and he had to crawl through dusty, narrow pipes to fix it. There were nights when a sick horse or a trapped calf would wake him at odd hours. Each task reminded him that being a rancher meant responsibility, endurance, and patience, qualities he had always admired in others but now had to summon himself. On this particular morning, as Tom sat catching his breath, he heard Emma calling from the yard. "Daddy, Lucas took my boots again," she shouted, frustration in her small voice. Tom groaned but stood, brushing dust from his jeans. He walked over, trying to untangle the arguments and keep the children from hurting each other. Lucas looked guilty, holding the boots like a treasure he wasn't ready to give back, and Sophie clapped her hands, excited by the drama. After he settled them, he went to the barn to feed the horses. Rusty nickered as he approached, nuzzling Tom's shoulder. There was comfort in the familiar routine, the smell of hay, the soft whinny of the horses, the warm sun on his face. Yet even in these moments, the loneliness lingered. He missed his wife terribly. She had been the heart of the household, managing the children and the kitchen with patience and care. Without her, everything felt heavier, noisier, and more complicated. As he stacked bales of hay, Tom thought about the future. How long could he keep this up? The town had offered a few part-time helpers, but they couldn't stay. Friends had offered advice, but they lived far away and had their own lives. He had exhausted every option he could think of, and for the first time he felt a flicker of fear that he might have to give up parts of his life, maybe even the ranch, to ensure the children were safe and cared for. By midday, the sun was high and the heat was nearly unbearable. Tom took a moment under the shade of the barn roof, wiping his brow and sipping water from a metal canteen. The children had gone back to playing in the yard, and for a brief moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that makes a man feel both peace and worry at the same time. He looked across the dusty fields, thinking about the world beyond the ranch. There were people who had easy lives, people with help and support. And here he was, trying to do it all alone. The thought made him ache, but it also steeled him. He had promised his wife he would take care of their children no matter what. And he would keep that promise. He would find a way, somehow. As the afternoon wore on, the children's energy seemed endless. Emma ran past, twirling in her dress, while Lucas tried to ride Rusty bareback, giggling as he wobbled. Sophie toddled after them, giggling and falling over, only to get back up with determination. Tom couldn't help but smile, even as he felt the exhaustion settle into his bones. These were the moments that made everything worth it. The laughter, the curiosity, the simple joy of childhood. Yet, as the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the desert in oranges and purples, Tom felt that weight again. The responsibility, the worry, the constant demand of life without a partner or a helping hand. He returned to the porch, sitting with his head in his hands, staring at the distant mountains. "How am I going to do this?" he whispered to the empty air. The wind rustled through the dry grass, carrying a hint of promise, though he didn't know what it might mean. 6 months had passed since his wife had left them, and in that time Tom had learned more about endurance, patience, and love than he ever thought possible. But even now, he didn't know if he could go on alone. Every day was a test, every night a reminder that he was the only one holding the household together. And as much as he tried to be strong, there was a small, quiet hope deep in his heart that maybe, just maybe, help would come. Little did he know that help was about to arrive in the most unexpected way. Tom was finishing up the evening chores when he first noticed her. At first, she seemed like a shadow on the horizon, a figure moving steadily through the dust. He squinted against the fading light, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. She moved with a quiet confidence, walking directly toward the ranch. The children had long since gone inside, and the horses were settling in their stalls, but something about the way she carried herself made Tom pause. As she drew closer, Tom could see her clearly. She was tall and strong, with dark hair braided down her back. Her clothing was simple, yet it seemed to belong perfectly to the land around her. There was a calmness about her, a kind of quiet power that made him instinctively step forward. "I'm Ahioka," the woman said, her voice steady and certain. "I heard you might need help. I'm here now." Tom blinked, caught off guard. He was used to people hesitating, unsure of what ranch life demanded. But this woman didn't hesitate. She simply looked at him, her dark eyes meeting his with a mix of determination and warmth. "I can help with the children," she continued. "I can help with the ranch work. I know the land. I know how to care for children. I am here to help you." Tom didn't know what to say. He had been alone for 6 months, struggling to keep everything in order. He had prayed for help but never imagined it would arrive like this. So calm, so certain, so unexpected. The children had noticed too. Emma had peeked out the window and whispered to Lucas, "Who is that?" Lucas followed, pressing his face against the glass. Sophie had toddled to the door, sensing that something important was happening. Tom finally managed to find his voice. You're serious?" he asked. "You want to work here? On the ranch?" Ioka nodded. "I'm serious. I can start now if you let me." Tom scratched his head. He had interviewed a dozen people before, most of them quitting after a day or two. This woman, whoever she was, seemed different. There was no hesitation, no fear, just a calm confidence that made him think she could actually do what she promised. Still, he was wary. It's not easy here," he said. "The children, they're lively, and the work is hard. You have to get up early, work late, and be ready for anything." Ahioka smiled faintly. "I am ready." There was a pause. The wind blew gently across the dusty yard, carrying the smell of dry grass and the faint scent of the horses. Tom could feel the weight of the past 6 months pressing on him. But something about this woman made him believe that maybe, just maybe, help had finally arrived. "You can stay. But I warn you, things are not easy here. You'll need patience, you'll need energy, and you'll need to earn the children's trust." Ahioka nodded again. "I understand. I am ready." The next morning, Ioka's work began immediately. She moved through the house with quiet purpose, organizing the kitchen, preparing breakfast, and making sure everything was ready for the day. Tom watched in awe as she handled Sophie, calming her when she fussed and making her giggle at the same time. Emma and Lucas were curious and cautious, but Ahioka spoke to them gently, with a tone that commanded respect without fear. "Good morning, Emma." "Good morning, Lucas," she said. "Today we will have breakfast, then we will take care of the animals together." The children looked at each other, unsure what to make of her, but her calm presence was comforting. For the first time in months, Tom felt a small sense of relief. He didn't have to do everything alone anymore. Ahioka had a way of working that was both efficient and graceful. She fed the animals, checked the fences, and even began teaching the children small chores. Emma carried water to the chickens, Lucas helped with the horses, and Sophie toddled along behind, trying to mimic them. They laughed when they spilled water or when the chickens ran in unexpected directions, and Ahioka simply smiled, gently guiding them back to their tasks. By midday, Tom noticed something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. He was busy repairing a broken fence, but he could hear the children's laughter, the soft clucking of the chickens, and the gentle encouragement of Ahioka's voice. The ranch didn't feel as heavy, as impossible as it had for the past 6 months. Over the next few days, Ahioka proved herself in ways Tom hadn't expected. She knew how to fix equipment, how to care for sick animals, and even how to make the children listen without raising her voice. Tom found himself watching her in admiration, amazed at her skill and patience. There was a quiet authority in the way she moved, a kind of natural understanding of both the land and the children that Tom had never seen before. One evening, after the chores were done, Tom and Ahioka sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the distant hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was warm and still. Tom finally spoke, breaking the silence. You really know what you're doing," he said. "I've tried managing this place alone, and I was failing. I didn't think anyone could help. And now, well, it feels like everything is starting to work." Ahioka looked at him calmly. "I only help when I am needed," she said. "And I see that you need help. That is why I am here." Tom nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and gratitude. For the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. The children were slowly warming up to Ahioka as well. Emma began asking her questions about the land, the animals, and even about her stories of growing up. Lucas would run to her for advice when he didn't understand how to do a chore, and Sophie, though still shy, had started calling her Ahioka's sister in her baby way. The trust that it seemed impossible to earn was growing every day. As the week went on, Tom realized that having Ahioka around was changing more than just the daily routines. He could finally focus on the ranch itself, planning, repairing, and improving, without the constant worry that the children were neglected. He even found moments to breathe, moments to watch the sunset or sit quietly, enjoying the simple beauty of the land he loved. Ahioka, meanwhile, never complained. She worked from sunrise to sunset, teaching the children, managing the household, and assisting Tom with the ranch. She had a gentle way of guiding him, too, suggesting ways to organize work or improve routines without ever being bossy. Tom began to appreciate not only her strength but also her wisdom. One afternoon, a sudden dust storm swept across the ranch. Tom was out repairing a fence when the wind picked up violently. The sky turned a strange shade of yellow, and the dust stung his eyes. He was about to call for the children when he heard Ahioka's calm voice above the wind. "Tom, come inside. The children are safe, but we need to protect the animals." Together they worked to secure the horses and chickens, bringing Sophie inside and guiding Emma and Lucas safely to the barn. Tom realized in that moment that he no longer had to face the dangers of ranch life alone. Ahioka was not just help. She was a partner in facing the challenges, someone who could keep the children safe and the ranch running. By the end of the week, Tom felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in months. The ranch was still hard work, and the children still had their lively moments. But with Ahioka there, the burden was lighter. He could see her calming presence making a difference in the children's lives, teaching them patience, responsibility, and respect. That night, as he lay in bed listening to the quiet house, Tom whispered a small thank you to the empty room. Help had arrived in a way he never expected, and for the first time in 6 months, he believed that maybe they could all make it together. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. Ahioka's presence would soon bring lessons, challenges, and changes that would transform the entire family and the ranch in ways he could never have imagined. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of life on the ranch slowly began to change. With Ahioka around, the chaos that had once defined Tom Harris's days started to feel more manageable. Yet, building trust between a new caretaker and 3 spirited children was no simple task. The first few days had been about establishing order, but now Ahioka focused on connecting with each child in her own gentle way. Emma was the first to respond. At 7 years old, she was sharp, curious, and often bossy with her younger siblings. Ahioka noticed that Emma liked to take control of situations, sometimes too quickly. Rather than scolding her, Ahioka encouraged her natural leadership but taught her how to guide others kindly. "Emma," she said one morning while they gathered eggs from the chicken coop, "you can help Lucas, but let him try too. He learns when he does things himself." Emma hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted to share responsibility. But Ahioka's calm tone and steady gaze made her try. When Lucas successfully carried the eggs without dropping them, Emma's face lit up with pride. Ahioka smiled softly, nodding. "See? You can lead without taking everything for yourself." Lucas, 5, was more hesitant. He was full of energy but easily frustrated when tasks seemed too hard. Ahioka approached him slowly, kneeling to meet his eyes at his level. "Lucas," she said, "I know this is tricky, but you can do it. Try first, and if you need help, I will be here. You are strong, just like your father." Lucas's face brightened. For the first time, he felt that mistakes were allowed, that failure wasn't the end. He began to attempt tasks with courage, sometimes laughing at himself when he stumbled, and Ahioka would laugh along with him, gently correcting him without anger. Slowly, he started to see that chores could be fun if approached with patience and guidance. Little Sophie, at just 2 years old, was the hardest to reach. She was shy, clinging to Tom's legs, or hiding behind furniture when strangers came near. Ahioka had noticed this from the first day. She never forced Sophie to interact, instead sitting quietly on the floor and letting Sophie come to her on her own time. She would sing soft songs in her gentle voice, showing patience that seemed endless. By the end of the second week, Sophie began to toddle toward Ahioka on her own, holding out a small stuffed animal as an offering. Ahioka's eyes softened as she accepted it, and from that moment, Sophie began to call her Ahioka sister, a name she used with pride. Tom watched this quietly from the porch, feeling a relief he hadn't known in months. But it wasn't just the children who were learning. Tom himself was slowly adjusting to having Ahioka in the house. He had been used to being in control of everything, making every decision, and managing every task on the ranch. Now, he found himself learning to trust someone else's judgment. At first it felt strange. He wanted to micromanage to ensure things were done his way. But Ahioka had a way of explaining things that made sense, a quiet authority that demanded respect without arrogance. One evening, after a long day of chores, Ahioka suggested a new routine for the children. "After dinner, we will have a quiet story time," she said. "It helps them rest and learn patience." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Story time? They hardly sit still for 5 minutes." Ahioka smiled. "They will learn. And you will see. It can be peaceful." That night, after the children had eaten their simple meal of soup and bread, Ahioka gathered them on a rug in the living room. She told them stories of the land, of animals, and of Apache traditions, speaking in a way that captured their imaginations. Emma listened wide-eyed, Lucas sat quietly for longer than usual, and Sophie clutched a blanket, content to watch and listen. Tom sat in the corner, quietly observing. He felt a wave of gratitude and astonishment. For 6 months, he had struggled alone, never imagining that life could feel this calm, this joyful, even amid the hard work of the ranch. He realized that Ahioka was more than a helper. She was teaching the children lessons he hadn't had time to teach, lessons about patience, respect, and caring for one another. Work on the ranch continued, but now it carried a different tone. Tasks that had once been stressful were becoming opportunities for learning and connection. Ahioka involved the children in everything: feeding animals, checking fences, and tending to the small garden behind the house. They learned to water plants, pick vegetables, and notice the way animals behaved when treated gently. Through these daily chores, they were learning responsibility without feeling burdened. One day, a small mishap occurred. Lucas had accidentally let a goat out of the pen, and it wandered toward the fence leading to the road. Tom's heart leaped into his throat as he ran to catch it, but Ahioka calmly placed a hand on his arm. "Let me handle this," she said. With patience, she guided Lucas to coax the goat back, speaking softly and demonstrating how to move without frightening the animal. The goat returned safely, and Lucas beamed, proud of what he had accomplished with Ahioka's guidance. Tom realized that she was teaching not just tasks but confidence, and that the children were learning skills that would stay with them for life. Even the evenings, once a time of exhaustion and stress, began to feel warm. After dinner, Ahioka would sit with the children, listening to them talk about their day, their discoveries, and their little frustrations. She validated their feelings without judgment, making them feel heard and understood. Emma, once bossy and sometimes stubborn, began to speak with care toward her siblings. Lucas learned to express himself without throwing tantrums, and Sophie became more confident in exploring her surroundings. Tom noticed subtle changes in himself as well. He no longer felt like the sole bearer of all responsibility. He could rest, knowing that the children were safe and learning valuable lessons. He began to trust not only Ahioka, but also the natural flow of life on the ranch. He found himself smiling more, laughing more, and even sharing in the children's small joys rather than focusing solely on work. Ahioka also taught them to appreciate the land. She showed Emma and Lucas how to recognize the tracks of animals in the dirt, how to observe the clouds to predict the weather, and how to care for the soil in their garden. Each lesson was practical, but also filled with stories and meaning that connected them to the world around them. The children began to see the ranch not just as chores and work, but as a place alive with learning and discovery. One afternoon, Tom caught a quiet moment of reflection. He watched Ahioka teaching Lucas how to milk a cow, her hands steady and precise. Emma was arranging wildflowers she had picked from the fields, and little Sophie was clapping and laughing at their antics. Tom realized that for the first time in months, he felt a sense of hope that had been absent since his wife's passing. Life was still hard, the ranch still demanding, but it was no longer lonely, and the children were growing in ways he hadn't imagined possible. By the end of the third week, trust had been established, not just between Ahioka and the children, but also between her and Tom. They shared responsibilities seamlessly, communicated without tension, and even found moments to laugh together. Tom no longer questioned whether he had made the right decision. He knew that Ahioka had been sent to them for a reason, and he felt a deep gratitude that went beyond words. The days were still long, the chores still hard, and the challenges of ranch life remained. But with Ahioka's calm strength guiding the household, the children learning and growing, and Tom learning to trust and let go, life felt manageable for the first time in half a year. For the first time in months, he could imagine a future that wasn't just about surviving, but about living, and living well. Little did he know that the coming months would test their patience, courage, and unity even further. But for now, the ranch felt like a place where hope could grow, and where the bond between caretaker, children, and father was slowly becoming unbreakable. Life on the ranch was slowly transforming in ways Tom Harris had never imagined possible. With Ahioka around, the daily chaos that once consumed him had softened into a rhythm that felt manageable, even enjoyable at times. The children were growing more confident and capable, and the household, once a place of constant stress, was beginning to feel like a true home again. Ahioka's presence brought structure and calmness that seeped into every corner of the ranch. She had a natural way of organizing the household without making it feel strict or harsh. Each morning, the children would wait to a gentle call from her, guiding them through simple routines that taught them responsibility and independence. Emma would brush her hair and help prepare breakfast. Lucas would feed the chickens, and little Sophie would assist by carrying small things from the kitchen to the table. Even tasks that had once seemed like chores were now opportunities for learning and connection. Tom noticed that the children's personalities were beginning to bloom under Ahioka's guidance. Emma, who had always been headstrong and sometimes impatient, was learning patience and empathy. She listened carefully to her younger siblings and began helping them without being asked. Lucas, who had once been easily frustrated and prone to tantrums, was now approaching challenges with curiosity and courage. Sophie, once shy and hesitant, had grown confident in exploring her surroundings, often toddling alongside her older siblings with a proud smile. It wasn't just the children who were changing. Tom himself was learning to trust Ahioka's wisdom. At first, he had been reluctant to let anyone else take charge, worried that the ranch and the children's well-being might suffer under someone else's care. But Ahioka had shown him that her calm confidence and knowledge of the land were invaluable. He began to rely on her guidance, letting her take the lead on certain tasks while he focused on others. The weight that had pressed so heavily on his shoulders for 6 months was beginning to lift. One afternoon, a challenge arose that tested the family in ways they had not yet faced. A sudden storm swept across the desert, dark clouds rolling in faster than anyone had expected. Winds whipped through the fields, and the children's laughter quickly turned to frightened cries. Tom and Ahioka moved quickly to secure the animals, guiding Emma and Lucas to help bring the horses and goats into the barn. Sophie clung to Ahioka, who soothed her with gentle words and steady hands. In the chaos of the storm, Tom realized how much he relied on Ahioka's calm presence. Where he might have panicked or grown frustrated, she remained composed, directing everyone with quiet authority. By the time the storm passed, the animals were safe, the children were unharmed, and Tom felt a profound sense of relief. He had once thought he had to manage everything alone, but now he saw clearly that he was not alone and never had to be. The storm became a turning point for the family. Afterward, Ahioka gathered the children in the living room, telling them stories of storms she had seen as a child growing up in the mountains. She spoke of courage, resourcefulness, and respect for nature. Emma listened intently. Lucas's eyes widened in wonder, and even Sophie sat quietly, absorbing the rhythm of her voice. Tom watched, amazed at how Ahioka turned a frightening experience into a lesson of resilience and learning. As the weeks passed, the transformation continued in subtle but meaningful ways. Ahioka introduced new routines that combined responsibility with creativity. She taught the children how to tend a small garden, showing them how to plant seeds, water them carefully, and watch them grow. Emma delighted in arranging the flowers in vases. Lucas loved digging and planting, and Sophie enjoyed helping by watering the plants with a tiny watering can. Through these activities, the children learned patience, care, and the satisfaction of seeing their work flourish. Ahioka also brought stories and traditions that connected the family to the land. She taught the children about the desert animals, the stars in the night sky, and the history of the land they lived on. Every story carried a lesson about respect, community, and resilience. The children began to see the ranch not just as chores and work, but as a living, breathing place full of life and learning. Tom observed these changes with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He had feared the loneliness and the overwhelming demands of ranch life, But now he saw how the family was thriving. He realized that Ahioka had not just helped with the work. She had transformed the household itself. The laughter of the children was brighter, the routines smoother, and the sense of connection deeper than it had been in months. Even the evenings, which had once been a time of exhaustion and quiet tension, became moments of bonding. After dinner, the family would gather on the porch to watch the sunset over the desert hills. Ahioka would tell stories and the children would ask questions, fascinated by her knowledge and the gentle wisdom in her voice. Tom sometimes joined in, sharing his own stories from when he was young, and together they created a sense of family that felt strong and unbreakable. Work on the ranch continued, of course, and challenges still arose. One day, a sick calf required extra care. Tom and Ioka worked side by side, demonstrating to the children how to tend to the animals with patience and skill. Emma carefully held the bucket of water, Lucas helped with the feeding, and Sophie watched intently, learning the importance of compassion and attention. By the end of the day, the calf was stable and the children had gained confidence in their abilities. Through these shared experiences, the bond between Tom, Ahioka, and the children grew stronger. They began to rely on one another in ways that went beyond simple chores. Emma looked to Ahioka for guidance and comfort, Lucas learned to trust both adults, and Sophie felt safe exploring the world around her. Tom realized that this unity, born from shared work and patience, was something he had been missing for a long time. One evening, after a long day of work and play, Tom sat quietly on the porch with Ahioka. The desert was calm and the stars began to twinkle in the clear sky. "You've changed everything," he said softly, almost in awe. "The children, the ranch, even me. I don't know how I could have managed without you." Ahioka smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I did not do this alone," she said. "The children were ready to learn, and you were ready to let them. We did this together." Tom nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had once thought life on the ranch would be a constant struggle, a test of endurance without relief. Now he saw that help, guidance, and patience could transform even the hardest life into something joyful and meaningful. Over the following weeks, Ahioka continued to teach the children practical skills and life lessons. She showed them how to make simple repairs around the ranch, how to observe and care for animals, and how to take responsibility for their actions. Each task became a learning opportunity, and each day brought a new sense of accomplishment. The children were thriving, the ranch was running smoothly, and Tom felt a renewed hope for the future. By the end of the 4th month, the family had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and fulfilling. The children were confident, capable, and happy. The ranch was productive, and the house was filled with laughter and warmth. Tom finally understood what he had been missing during the 6 months alone: the strength and guidance of someone who could lead with kindness, patience, and wisdom. Ahioka had not only helped with the work, she had transformed the entire family. She had taught the children lessons they would carry for life, helped Tom trust in himself and others, and created a sense of unity that made the ranch feel like a home once again. As the sun set one evening, casting golden light over the fields, Tom watched Ahioka with the children, guiding them through their evening chores. He felt a quiet, deep gratitude. Life was still hard, and the work was never ending, but now it was shared. Now it was possible to see joy in the challenges, beauty in the routines, and hope in the future. Little did Tom know that the coming months would continue to test their patience, courage, and resilience in ways none of them expected. But for now, the transformation was clear. The family was stronger, closer, and more capable than ever before. And it all began with Ahioka quietly saying, "I'm here now." The weeks turned into months, and the ranch was thriving in a way Tom Harris had never thought possible. What had once been chaos and exhaustion was now a place of harmony, learning, and laughter. The children were no longer the restless, tired kids he had struggled to manage. They were confident, happy, and full of curiosity. And at the center of this transformation was Ahioka, the Apache woman who had quietly entered their lives and changed everything. Tom watched her one morning as she led the children through the early chores. Emma carefully carried a basket of eggs from the coop, Lucas guided the goats to their pen, and little Sophie toddled behind, clutching a small watering can. Ahioka's movements were steady and assured, her voice calm as she guided them. "Good job, Lucas. Watch the goats carefully and don't forget to check the fence," she said softly. "Emma, remember to place the eggs gently. Sophie, thank you for helping with the water." The children listened, following her instructions, but there was no tension, no fear, only trust. They had learned to rely on her, to respect her guidance, and to enjoy the work as part of their daily lives. Tom felt a swell of pride in his chest. 6 months ago, he had been struggling to keep the household running, barely managing to care for the children and the ranch. Now they moved together as a family, a unit that functioned with cooperation, understanding, and care. Ahioka had also helped Tom grow in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had learned to let go of his need to control every task, to trust someone else's experience and judgment. He no longer felt the crushing weight of responsibility pressing down on him alone. Instead, he felt supported, confident, and grateful. Watching Ahioka guide the children, teaching them both practical skills and lessons about patience, respect, and resilience, he understood something he had never realized before. Life was easier and more meaningful when shared. The ranch itself reflected the change. Fences were repaired and maintained, crops and gardens flourished, and the animals were healthier than ever. The air was filled with the sounds of life, the clucking of chickens, the neighing of horses, the laughter of children, and the gentle guidance of Ahioka's voice. Every corner of the ranch carried the evidence of months of care, love, and attention. One evening, after a long day of work, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. The desert stretched before them, painted in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The sky was wide and open, and the warm breeze carried the scent of dry grass and earth. The children sat close to Ahioka, listening to her tell stories about the stars and the desert animals, while Tom leaned back in his chair, quietly taking it all in. "Ah." "You know," Tom said softly, breaking the silence, "I never imagined life could be like this again. After my wife, I didn't think I could manage, and I didn't think the children could thrive. But now I see that we're stronger than ever." Ahioka smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "Strength comes from patience, care, and working together," she said. "You and your children have always had it. I only helped guide you to see it." Emma, sitting cross-legged on the rug at Ahioka's feet, looked up and said, "I like when we all work together. It feels happy." Lucas nodded in agreement, and little Sophie clapped her hands, echoing their joy. Tom felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in months, a sense of family, of unity, and of hope for the future. The transformation wasn't just emotional, it was practical too. The children had learned how to care for the animals, maintain the ranch, and handle small tasks on their own. They had learned the value of patience and teamwork, of taking responsibility for their actions, and of appreciating the land they lived on. Ahioka had turned everyday chores into lessons, and in doing so, she had given them confidence, pride, and independence. Tom marveled at the changes he saw. Emma had become a natural leader, guiding her siblings with kindness rather than bossiness. Lucas approached challenges with curiosity and courage, no longer frustrated when things were difficult. Sophie, once shy and hesitant, now explored the ranch with joy and confidence, eager to learn and participate. And through it all, Tom realized that he himself had grown, not just as a rancher or a father, but as a person. One morning, as Tom worked repairing a section of fence with Ahioka's guidance, he paused to look at her. "You know," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I don't know what we would have done without you. I didn't think help like this could really exist." Ahioka glanced at him, her expression calm and gentle. "Help exists," she said, "but sometimes it comes in unexpected ways. You were ready to accept it, and that is why it worked." Tom nodded, understanding the truth in her words. He had been proud, stubborn, and determined to do everything himself. But Ahioka had shown him that strength could also be found in trusting others, in sharing responsibilities, and in guiding the children with care. He realized that her arrival 6 months ago had been more than just help. It had been a gift, a turning point for their family. The children had also formed a bond with Ahioka that went beyond simple trust. They laughed with her, shared their thoughts and fears, and learned from her example. She taught them how to notice the small details in life, the tracks of animals in the dirt, the shapes of clouds, the way the wind moved through the trees. She encouraged them to observe, to think, and to care. Through these lessons, the children began to understand that life was not just about work or chores, but about connection, awareness, and respect. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher came by, curious to see the changes on Tom's property. He commented on how well the children behaved, how organized the ranch was, and how smoothly everything ran. Tom smiled quietly, knowing that the real change was deeper than appearances. It was in the children's confidence, the family's bond, and the sense of peace that now filled the home. Even challenges no longer felt insurmountable. When a small herd of goats wandered too close to the road, the children helped guide them back under Ahioka's supervision. When a young horse became sick, they assisted in caring for it, learning patience, careful observation, and the importance of attention to detail. Each small challenge became a chance to learn, grow, and strengthen the family bond. As the months passed, Tom reflected on the journey they had taken. He remembered the long, lonely days before Ahioka arrived, the struggle to manage everything alone, the fear that he might fail his children. And now, looking at the thriving household, he realized how far they had come. The laughter of the children, the sound of horses in the pasture, and the calm guidance of Ahioka had transformed not just the ranch, but their lives. One evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Tom and Ahioka sat on the porch together, the sky dark and full of stars. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. You've changed our lives. I don't know how to repay you." Ahioka shook her head gently. "No repayment is needed," she said. "The reward is seeing your family grow, seeing the children learn, and knowing that you have found strength you didn't know you had. That is enough." Tom felt a deep sense of peace. The weight of the past 6 months had lifted, replaced by hope, gratitude, and love. He knew that the journey was not over. Life on a ranch would always bring challenges, but he also knew that they could face anything together. With Ahioka, the children, and the bond they had built, he felt ready for whatever the future might bring. As the first light of dawn touched the desert, the ranch came alive with movement and sound. Emma carried water to the garden, Lucas fed the chickens, and Sophie clapped with delight at the small adventures of the morning. Ahioka guided them all, her presence calm and steady, while Tom observed quietly, proud of the family they had become. The ranch was more than a place to live. It had become a home filled with learning, laughter, and love. The children had grown, the animals thrived, and Tom had discovered a strength within himself that he had never known. And it all began with a single, simple sentence: "I'm here now." Ahioka had arrived quietly, with no fanfare or announcement, and yet she had transformed their lives completely. She had taught patience, responsibility, kindness, and courage, not just to the children, but to Tom as well. And as the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, he realized that their lives would never be the same again, in the most wonderful way. Tom knew that the days would continue to bring hard work and unexpected challenges, but now he faced them with hope, confidence, and the unwavering support of someone who had become family. The ranch, the children, and their hearts were stronger, united, and full of life. And for the first time in a long time, Tom felt truly, completely at peace.